Welcome back to our third episode of the Push and Pull podcast. I'm back again with Michael Tatham, and today we're going to tackle the key question of all. Why are we doing that? Why are we still continuously improving the method? Why are we still going out there? Why do we record this podcast after all? So Michael, why are we doing that?
Why? It's a great question. I think ultimately we have to practice what we preach. Firm believer in this way of thinking. I've seen the benefits over the years with clients personally as well as their organizations, and it's important for us to again practice what we preach and listen to our customers' feedback. And I would even add, just as recent as every organization went through some sort of transformation during COVID, then we had ours as well. And when some of our top clients who have been using our system for many years said, Michael, what are we going to do? We don't have the ability to run boot camp right now. It's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of how we operate. Can you figure something out? And I was like, oh goodness, we have to figure out a way to bring this thing virtual. And I have to admit, the first thing that came to mind is, how are we going to take something that's so experiential and tangible and bring it to a virtual environment? And I would argue that we've really taken it to a phenomenal place, considering. But it's not just the boot camp experience. I know we talk a lot about that. It's also, the method itself, the fact that organizations are strapped for time and resources, and we have to come up with creative and innovative ways to still maintain the discipline, but at the same time understand that and empathize that certain customers don't have the flexibility that they all want to have. So we have to kind of work around. I mean, you, Tim, experienced that firsthand. I think talk to us about your first team that you ran, but we also had what we called quick wins, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like you said, I started in February of 2021 with my then new employer, and I think we outlined it already. The third day of me being there, I got to experience you being thrown in. So two days in the new environment. What are they doing? What am I doing as a person here? What are they asking me to do? Mm-hmm. And then the third day you get thrown into boot camp, and Jesus, what is happening here? Someone's soldering certain stuff. What has that to do with what I'm about to do? And then the further we progress, the more obvious it got that there's connection to everything. Whether it was being a team member in the first team, mm-hmm. Not knowing the business, not knowing what they're all about, not even knowing the people. But through the method, you had a systematic approach on how to tackle processes that I didn't experience myself, that I had no knowledge about. But by going through them systematically, we were able to create outcome for our customers and our brokers. And then ultimately, a couple months later, my manager was crazy enough to allow me to coach my own team.
Right.
And that opened up an entire new view of, okay, I know the team member perspective, but that there's so much more behind it. There's so much more reason why we do certain things in bootcamp, where we do them, and why we set certain triggers where we set them into coaching a team through the 8 weeks, because that it's getting personal. It's
heated. Yeah.
It gets heated. You try to scratch on conflicts that have been brewing over years or even mm-hmm. decades, and now you're uncovering them. You mm-hmm. set light on them, and then you're in the middle of that, being, how old I was back there, 24, 5 months into the company, a no name, and now you're in the midst of decades old conflicts, and you're just there with your checklist and with mm-hmm. your systematic method, and you guide them through very heavy waters. And that's the power of what you described as the method.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great example. It's tough, I find, sometimes, because when you become an advocate of this way of thinking, it boils down to thinking critically about problems.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where they reside, and you start going into an environment where, I've used this analogy many times, it's like the organization is like a giant ship that goes through the ocean, and it starts to build these barnacles on the outside. Yeah. And these barnacles are the ways you've always done it, sometimes for good reason, whether it be a legal or compliance, some sort of outside influence that creates, a rule or regulation that you can't get away from. And then over years, it builds and builds and builds, and then it starts to slow the ship down. Yeah. And look, legitimately, some of these things you can't get away from, but then there are quite a few that you can ask, why are we doing it like this? Or is there a better way of doing it? And it's hard for the organization to stand up and question that. And in fact, and you just outlined it, many times when you ask why we're doing things this way, you get those that have invested so much time and energy to build it this way, and now suddenly they're being questioned, they get defensive naturally. Yeah. So I think that goes back to the boot camp experience, and then bring everyone on a level playing field, saying, like, it's not about blaming people. Definitely. This is about looking at the system as a whole. Is it delivering the quality and the delivery to the customer and the value? Is it doing that? And if it's not, then what can we do as a team and an organization to design it so that it can provide that value consistently with minimal effort?
Yeah, it's like you said, this piece or this part of human-centered design. It's we have systems or even processes in place that don't serve the people that are operating them. It's make them suffer, but they suffer through it because they don't know it better, or they're not even allowed to ask the question why they do things. And especially, like you said, in teams, you become a truffle pig for the answer of because we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
If you ask why long enough, you either get a good reason and you can work with it, or you get the answer, that's how we've always done it. And then okay, that's where the magic happens. And you see it especially in teams. The first time when a senior manager says, that's how we've always done it, it's like, oh, okay, I'm backing down. I've always done it that way. And that after a certain period of time, as soon as the sentence comes, it's like, okay, now we're good. Now we can start.
Yeah, that's where you get a lot of quiet quitters.
Oh, yeah.
Challenging the way things are done, the opportunity to make change and have a say in how things can be moving forward. I think what would be even worse, though, I think you probably experienced a bit of this, is participating in an endeavor where you have the opportunity to have your ideas come to the table, and then finding out that they either get ignored or they just never get implemented. They agree to and never implemented. So that's really discouraging. And I would argue for the younger generations, I mean, you can speak to this, that if you don't have the right support, the right leadership in place, and you giving the young kind of up and coming leaders the opportunity to contribute to the business and show them that you value their opinion, you're going to lose them. They're just going to either check out and quiet quit, or they're just going to leave altogether. Yeah. And so there is that side of it. We always talk about efficiency, right? That's always the big thing, is efficiency. How many dollars saved, how much revenue generated. That's important, obviously, but that really shouldn't be, in my opinion, I don't think it should be the focus. I think it goes back to, and this is a word that's overused, empowerment. Yeah. And you can achieve those results as a byproduct of giving some of the key people who work directly with your customers every day, give them that opportunity to just bring a discipline to changing the way that you operate. And then you've got them for life, because it's building like a legacy to some degree.
If you have the proper system in place then to take their improvement proposals and let them follow through with them. Because we've had that in the last episode. The most emotionally draining thing is if you allow people to challenge things, let them come up with solutions that are data proven, that have the process view inside, and especially have the customer's view inside. And if you let them tell a story, a concise story about that, and you don't give them the support to follow through with it, I experienced that. It's a mental error in my head. It's like, we went through the motion, we went through the checklist, we had 8 weeks of the team doing the dirty work, going into the deeds, talking to the customer, maybe not always have happily ever after calls to the customer. It's like you open up, it's like, where are deficiencies? And customer or brokers, customers, they open up about that. And you take it, you develop it, and then someone just says no because of we've always done it that way. And that's a mental error that's very challenging to continuously, either you quit or you move on.
Agreed. And you actually bring about a really great point. I mean, I'm continuously learning as well. A big shout out to all the CEOs and leaders over the years that have shown me great ways of growing an organization and interacting with their teams and their colleagues. And then those who have done the wrong things, we teach you what not to do. I think that if I look back at all the clients over the years, the ones that were truly successful, and this is even before my time, this is, going back over 50 years we've been in business. It comes back to those leaders that see the value in the teams and the team's really looking beneath the surface. It's the whole iceberg model. You know, you've got a whole lot of problems that are on the surface that are quite small, and you think a quick fix will get rid of them. But the leaders that allow the teams to dig below the surface to really see how big problems can be and kind of pull them apart and put them back together again, regardless of what the solutions they come up with are. Just getting the nod from the CEO or the senior leader that's sponsoring it, it's such an empowering feeling, and the organization will bend over backwards.
Yeah.
You know, teams will bend over backwards to, you know, do what they need to do for the customer and for each other because they can see they have the support. You know, it goes back to good leadership. So definitely you need, as you know, it requires good leadership as well. It's not a magic checklist that makes all your problems go away.
Yeah, just taking on the point of checklists, in the improvement proposal checklist at the very end, there are two key parts to check on that checklist.
Mm-hmm.
First question is, dear leader, did you understand what we talked about? Did you understand our story? It's a yes or no question. Usually it's a yes. And then the second, even more important question, are you convinced and do you want to follow through with what we discovered? Those are the crucial parts in a checklist. And then again, it's usually you put them on the spot. It's they probably won't say no, but then again, hold their feet to the fire to follow through with it. But I just wanted to transition to another part.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that topic of checklists so enshrined in this methodology?
There's two elements to this. One, founder of the company, obviously Michael Sr., my father. I think he's a second generation aviator because my grandfather was also an aviator. I mean, this is a big part of aviation culture. And for anyone who's not familiar with the Tenerife crash, you could go Google it online. Not that I want to be talking about airline accidents. It talks a lot about CRM, which is cockpit resource management, and the whole culture in the cockpit, and the importance of checklists. And it's just been a part of how our company has been successful over the years, and we know how important following a checklist is. And you know, if you look at, I also have my pilot's license, and when I learned how to fly, especially at the beginning, I'm not 100% confident in my memory.
Yeah.
You know, and I've also got a lot of intuitive responses that are not necessarily correct, or good habits for that matter. And what's been wonderful about, at least when you start to learn how to fly, is that you know, you kind of turn your brain off to some degree, and you follow the checklist, and the checklist is designed to keep you safe.
Yep.
Right? It's designed to prevent errors. It's designed to prevent accidents. So in that respect, the checklist is just absolutely phenomenal. And then you can apply it to business in the same way, because just like in an airline simulator, you have intuitive responses to these emergency situations, and you're under pressure. We're human beings. We make mistakes. So making the wrong call when you've got, you know, a whole fuselage full of passengers can, you know, cause death.
Yeah.
You know, and a crash could kill everyone. So you want to make sure you've got that buttoned up as much as possible. So in the aviation world, checklist is at the forefront. And I love seeing it in the business as well, because you have the same, you have similar emergency situations, maybe not life-threatening, but you are making decisions on the fly, you're under pressure, and sometimes taking that step back and then taking a deep breath and saying, hey, where are we at? Do we really understand the problem we're trying to solve here? You know, are we jumping to a solution? Have we got any data to show us otherwise? Like a lot of those steps that I think, again, are fairly intuitive for a lot of people, but not necessarily put in the right order. The checklist has got a phenomenal way of keeping you on track. And it's like a great confidence builder, I find.
Yeah.
I'll just add, and maybe I'll get your kind of 2 cents on this as well. You know, I've worked with tons of clients over the years, and I keep alluding to NASA because they're just so smart. Like, I don't know the answers to how to solve their problems. I just know and have confidence in following the checklist, and then when I watch them follow it, they could do it 10 times better than I could.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the things probably the best thing about having a checklist that is just so repeatable, is that it provides a sense of confidence. And so even with all the ambiguity that you have in business, having that checklist really becomes that beacon, I think, to tackle those problems. And what are your thoughts? Did you find that especially for you coming into the business with fresh eyes and not really a whole lot of experience? Maybe tell us a bit what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's not always fresh eyes are not always appreciated.
Yeah, that's true.
Upfront. But just as we talked about processes as being non-political, being non-personal, just a series of steps that if you follow them create output. And with a checklist, for me, it's similar. It guides you away from your intuitive responses, especially the more senior you get, my opinion, the more you have the confirmation bias in yourself. It's like you've seen it all, you know it better, there might be a new shiny technology, and it's like, if I just get that silver bullet into my system, it might just solve everything. But the rigor of the checklist is, what's your data, what's the process, what does your customer tell you, and just making you think that way and compiling a story that guides you to a point. It might confirm your bias, or you might be right from your gut, but just having data process, just having that in place and confirm it, and even have more transparency and traceability the more further you grow your business case. At some point you might be tracked against it. Is the benefit that you initially thought it would provide, is that still valid? And if you don't have a proper baseline, how will you ever track it? It's then just a patchwork of firefighting missions, and that's usually an environment that the first 2 years of my professional career spent in. I was an external consultant, and we were firefighters.
Yeah.
We were hired to solve problems, not understand the root cause, but there's a fire, put it out, onto the next one.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
No.
I think that's probably the toughest part about doing this work, is that you know that by slowing down, applying discipline, and really trying to understand the problem at its roots, like taking it all apart and putting it back together again, you know how every part functions, how it, is a mechanical example, or a technical example. But when you take, a machine apart and you see what makes it tick, then you can kind of start to understand why it's working or not working. You get to understand how it works. Yeah. It's not a black box. It's not, hey, this comes out of this. You start to understand how all the parts work together to create whatever the outcome is. But there's plenty of a black box going on in an organization where, especially with technology, it goes in, you kind of hope it comes out the right way, and if it doesn't, you start tinkering with it. Yeah. Instead of really pulling it apart and saying, well, this is what makes this tick or not. And so now we really understand what's happening beneath the surface. And that takes discipline, it takes courage, but it's needed.
Yeah, but especially I find that hard, or I see it's hard for a lot of people that go slow to go fast. One of your favorite quotes. It's hard to do that because it's counterintuitive to a certain part. There's a problem, I have to put it out. But what if I take the time that I actually need? And this short term, maybe you salvage certain resources for a short term proper analysis, but the long term gains are even greater. But this thinking is usually not what I see.
Yeah, it's true. This whole conversation becomes more of a psychological conversation than does an actual, whether it be process or efficiency. I mean, it's all related. But where do we spend most of our time as coaches? Encouraging. Yeah. Probably the best way to put it would be to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And we've been there before. We've seen that this ambiguity makes you nervous. Yes, you're following a checklist that you're not used to, and it's counterintuitive. Just get them through that first try. And once they get through that first try, they see the value. It's almost like you can't go back. Yeah. I love using, this because I say it a lot, I love using the analogy of one of my favorite movies, The Matrix, where Neo knows that there's something that's not right. And he follows that bunny to ask himself, really, what is the Matrix? Yeah. And then he finally gets to seeing it, and you can't unsee it. I mean, he decided to take the red pill, right?
So basically what you're saying, you're Morpheus and you have your shades on and you just hand out blue and red pills. And
I wish it was that easy. But maybe to some degree boot camp is like that red pill to some degree. But not everyone who goes through boot camp, to be honest, once they take the red pill, they kind of want to go back to the blue sometimes. Yeah, that's normal. And that's okay. But I like to focus on those early adopters and those that want to make change. That see the value in this. And I think for many, at least what I'm witnessing now since COVID, is it's this avenue to having a good work-life balance. Yeah. I'm not staying up so late firefighting constantly, that I'm actually able to spend more time with the family, do things, have hobbies that I want to do, all that kind of stuff. So I think, if anything, that's a good reason to take the pill.
I would definitely agree. But it's good that we captured that you're more for than just handing out pills to people. Good to know that.
Yeah.
Just from because you spoke to it, the company is 50 years old. Your father founded it, handed it over to you, and I mean, you're, like you said, you're eating your own cookie about constantly improving the bootcamp experience. Just in the setting where we are, in a very fast-paced, ever-changing business environment, having this rather archaic, Model A part. Why do you think this kind of experience still has a valid place in where we are at the moment?
I guess it's such a timeless example. I mean, boot camp was not developed in a room in isolation. It was, I mean, you hear the story about it, how boot camp came about, but I won't get into that. I think what's more important to understand is that the evolution of the product came from real life. So everything that you witness in it are things that happened and continue to happen because it's really part of human nature.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is putting a giant sports clock up on the wall, which creates pressure.
Yeah.
And that pressure forces you to then start doing things that are intuitive. You don't have the time to sit back and think things through, so you go back to your intuitive response of throwing solutions around or whatever it might be. So I think the analogy of the Model A, as you held up over there, is phenomenal because you can really draw that metaphor to any kind of business. You have departments that come together, whether you be manufacturing or you're an information business, you could be e-commerce, you could be building a satellite, it could be anything, right? So I think that the other piece is that it's tangible, and I think I'm alluding more now towards the physical residential experience. Is it's nice for people to get their hands on something.
Yeah.
I know that you didn't really get that opportunity right away because it was during COVID.
But you were nice enough to send me some letters with some Model A's. Yeah. To give me some part of the experience.
Yeah.
As well.
So people like, especially now, I think I would argue, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think people like coming together again.
Yeah.
So building something together is great, but it's not like, hey, we're building a dinky Lego. We're building something that was a real product. We got 800-degree soldering irons. A turkey cooks at 425 to give you an idea. So it's, take it seriously. And then also, I think, and we alluded to this yesterday or on the last podcast, and that was that when you have an organization that's going through a simulation that's very specific to their industry, they tend to really hold on to that confirmation bias a lot longer. Yeah. So either way, they're gonna have biases. They're gonna come in with them, how the problem should be solved, looking at the current solution. You kind of get these blinders on to some degree. Yeah. And I think that especially financial services, they come in and they're building a Model A. They're not used to that. They kind of enjoy it. Yeah. I get to build something. It's not really our business. And they very quickly see that Model A can represent a loan in a bank. It could represent, an insurance policy. It could represent, a customer who's an e-commerce customer purchasing something online. From the moment you find it and you get it in your checkout all the way to it being delivered to your front door. Yeah. And it can represent anything. So I think that's kind of kept it timeless. And there's definitely the grassroots to this company that have made us stay in business this long. And I think it's really important for us to remember them. Yeah. Obviously, we have to evolve, but I think one of them is the tangibility and the applicability of the analogy of the bootcamp experience, as well as other, micro-learning exercises we have. Yeah,
talking to the tangibility, basically in every pocket, every jacket, every whatever I have, there's a Model A everywhere. Whenever I'm talking, like, what is that? And then I start talking and I cannot stop talking. It's John, sorry, we're gonna have to talk about it. It's infectious. Yeah. It's going viral. And maybe transitioning, because you said one part is that certain industries think that their problem is so unique that you have to have a unique experience. It's a quote from Deming, or it's a thought from Deming. And transitioning over in CPI and the Tatham systematic method, the roots of Deming, of quality management, of the Toyota production system, of all of that process improvement perspective. This is not a standalone methodology. And maybe talking about, that I'm a Six Sigma black belt, I'm a safe practice consultant, so I have a lot of perspectives on lean management and the entire agility part. But from your perspective, what sets CPI and the Tatham systematic method apart from very familiar other methodologies?
That's a really good question. I think at the core, it's an emotional connection. I'm also familiar with Six Sigma and Lean, and I look at those methodologies, if you will, as tools.
Yeah.
Right, and we have tools in the Tatham system as well. But I think our whole suite of products and services are almost like a blueprint, if you will. So it's not just a hammer to hit in a nail. It's also about looking at your entire organization, the transformation, the leadership capability, the change management aspects. It's all encompassing. And the Tatham system really is that kind of blueprint, if you will, to going from, as our podcast shows, from push to pull.
Yeah.
And there are definitely very similar techniques in there. Like we talk about the 7 deadly wastes, and they're great concepts. And I quite honestly, I don't care where they came from. I think I would argue that some of them were actually created by my father, Michael Sr. But look, they work. And I think our offering really is differentiated because of that emotional connection in boot camp. And then here's the piece I love the most. Like, I'm not an engineer.
You're
right?
not, no.
Right. So the thought process is, well, if you want to do systems engineering, you got to find an engineer to do that. And yeah, engineers are great at applying process improvement or process design. But I would argue that anyone can do it. And I think that at the end of the day is how we differentiate ourselves, is we've been able to package up this offering and bring concepts of process improvement, some themes and concepts of pull leadership, transformative business transformation, all of those things, and wrap them up in just a wonderful experience so that anyone, whether you're working in the mailroom of the organization right up to the leading as a CEO, everyone can speak the same language and feel like this is something they can do. It's not just for process people.
Yeah.
So
I would agree.
Yeah.
And what sets it apart for me is the focus on not creating efficiency for the sake of efficiency. It's like in Six Sigma, it's all about variance. It's limiting variance to create efficiency. We do it a different way. For us, efficiency is just a nice side product of focusing on a customer and improving quality first. And just from a sales, not a sales perspective, but from an internal marketing perspective, there might be people that have been burned by Six Sigma, because Six Sigma in itself is a very great concept, but the way some Six Sigma projects were implemented are just not to the benefit of the people that are actually executing it. And so I think the way that the bootcamp experience, the way that we structure teams, the way that we want to empower teams and let them ask why, and not just throw out steps for the sake of efficiency, is what sets this methodology apart for me.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And that's been the feedback we've had for many years. And don't get me wrong, like, I've been exposed to Six Sigma multiple times in various clients, and still even current clients, there are some Six Sigma black belts that are brought in at specific times. You have a stable process and you're looking at the variation and you want to minimize that variation. Yeah. But then what the great part is the teams using the Tatham system have all got the data in place now. They've got stability.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect time to hand it over to a business analyst or a Six Sigma expert, right? But I still go back to, I really like the idea of the business and individual contributors, leaders, embracing this way of thinking without having to kind of, I'd say, be certified, but feeling like they need to be an expert in it, right? You can know just enough to get into trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that equipping everyone with that mindset and that belief that it works, you can have different levels of expertise. Not everyone has to be certified, for example. Yeah. I've seen leaders, there was one leader we had to this day, he went through boot camp, absolutely loved it, was not Six Sigma trained, didn't know anything about process, and he was a fairly senior leader as well. Probably ran one of the best boot camps I've ever seen. In fact, learned in this very room. And he rallied people in a way that I've not seen anyone rally people before. And he had plenty of Six Sigma black belts working with him and lean practitioners. And they found it really useful because he was able to get groups of people together that really didn't buy into process that much and completely flip them around to a 180 and bring them all together speaking the same language. And then no one was mentioning methodology names anymore. It was just critical thinking at its best, you know? I think that's where it was very powerful. And again, he didn't have any experience in process before, but he just really latched on to the bootcamp experience and said, we can implement this way of thinking, and it's going to help a lot. And it's not counterintuitive, right? It's actually fairly intuitive once you put the steps in the right order and you can see the power of doing it. So don't want to feel like we're starting a cult or anything, but it really is just about basic problem solving skills. So
it is, yeah. And no, it's not bashing of other methodologies.
No, absolutely not.
It's a complete opposite. I mean, we started talking over or beyond the just coach relationship that we had once I went through the agile coaching of SAFe and the Scale Agile framework. Like, I've been a Scrum Master for eternity. I think I had my Scrum Master certification back in 2020, and that's what actually helped me transitioning into the CPI coach role, because it's fairly comparable, even though it's not exactly the same, but the role of a Scrum Master is comparable. It's not that you're the hero of the team, rather you ensure that the team has everything it needs to be successful. So that helped me in the transition. But where we properly started talking way beyond of what the actual client-customer or coach-coach relationship was the methodology around SAFe, everything that comes with flow, integrating processes, products, and customers. Let's just allude to it, especially with the new framework, SAFe 6.0, sorry. Flow became a crucial part of the entire overall Scale Agile framework. Let's just, we know we have a lot of flow exercises, but especially the card exercise. Just give us a little insight on why flow is such an important part of the Tatham systematic method as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back to this misconception that anytime you use the word process, it means structure, it means lack of flexibility, it's bureaucracy. Yeah. It takes forever. It's like, come on. I think, and I would argue that lean was lean came out of the fact that Six Sigma was so regimented and that it took so long. So then a lot of the lean practices became like little workshops that you could do to just identify quick wins, which I think is great. But there's still an element of, if you don't get to the root of the problem, for example, then that can interrupt flow. So I think the first piece I would talk about would be looking at things from end to end. And I know, again, this has been around for many years, but taking the perspective from the moment a customer even has the idea of purchasing something or a product or a service, all the way to them being very happy with what they received at the right quality, the right delivery, the value, and that if there were any changes involved, any type of responsiveness, that was checked off. I think that the flow piece is something you have to feel. And I think a lot of organizations that are so super siloed, they can't wrap their heads around that because they're internal focuses. Yeah. Right. And that's part of it, a push organization, is that focus is more internal than external. And that's why you have to do things like create these customer journey maps and empathize with the customer and human-centered design. They're all things that are helping the business reconnect with the customer and understand and feel that journey. I actually love those shows. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a show about a CEO that would go and try and work in their own business and see what it was like
Undercover Boss.
Undercover Boss, yeah. So I really love that concept, and we allude to that a lot about, when we worked with an airline, it was get the CEO to fly his own flight, don't fly first class. Like when we worked with Greyhound, it was go purchase a ticket from the moment you purchase your ticket to arriving at your destination, to really feel that customer experience. That all goes back to flow. So the way that you design that customer experience from end to end, anything that's having you wait, or that becomes a constraint or a bottleneck, or creates rework for the customer. I know I'm using kind of some of these terms not everyone may be familiar with, but anything along that journey from end to end that is not continuously having that feeling of flow, of value. You can see the difference, and especially in boot camp, you can feel like when you have a pull system and the flow is embedded in that end-to-end process, it feels amazing.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's for all the SAFe practitioners out there, it's flow accelerator number 7. Optimize the time in the zone. Get rid of all the noise around you, but create a system where people can actually do their work, enjoy their work. Like you said I think in an episode 2, any episode, it's you want to go to work Sunday evening because you know that your work is fulfilling. You feel empowered that you really want to go there. It's creating that time in the zone and not just interrupting you left and right because you have to firefight all day.
Yeah, it's I can't remember who gave me this example, but push corporation is really like brushing your teeth while eating Oreos. So to be able to have done one or the other, it's like kind of covering itself up. So yeah, a flow state is when it requires getting the team together, right? A representation from each of the silos from end to end, having them all understand how the value is flowing through the system, and then identifying the constraints, and then designing something that seamlessly works from end to end, right? And taking that customer perspective, empathizing with the customer. And it's a wonderful feeling once you get it built.
Oh, definitely. So we've talked a lot about why. We also established that you're a Morpheus from the Matrix and you're handing out pills to your customers.
You're hanging on to that one.
I really do.
I got to get a cloak and a pair of sunglasses now.
Yeah, or a proper leather suit and jacket.
Yeah,
we'll get there as well. But just my last question to round out this episode is, what motivates you? What keeps you up? Why are you still getting up every day, coming into the office and want to work with clients? What's your motivation? What's your why going forward?
Yeah, that's very concrete in my mind. Every morning I'm waking up, I'm thinking about that individual that's working deep in the underbelly of the organization of a client. And maybe not even a client yet, it's just, a business. And they wake up every morning and it's counting beads, and look, some jobs require that, but I think about how much exposure they get to customers and the ways of doing things, and it's all day they get that exposure. They have these amazing ideas and they're just not sure of how to bring them to the surface, or maybe just kind of put them together. So at the end of the day, I think my mission is to show the C-suite that you have all these diamonds in the rough, and that our system has got a really great way of pulling them out and giving them a voice. Because the voice, it's going to help you hit your P&L, but it's also going to create an engagement that's going to spread like a wildfire right across the organization. So I think it would go down to providing that voice to those that don't have a voice.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
That's for that. That's our third episode. Thank you, Michael, for your time. And hope you'll tune in to another episode when we're talking to Michael Tatham Sr. about how he founded that company and how he got to where we are today. Thank you very much. And
Thanks, Tim.